And welcome to Storylines and Sunshine. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the books I read in August of 2021. Some of the books were good. There was one book that was very strange, and we'll get into that. And I also think I might have found one of my favorite reads of the year. The first book I'm going to talk about, I actually listened to on audio, and that is the final revival of Opal and Nev. Now, this book originally came on my radar because it was a book of the month back in March. However, I had read some reviews that said this book might be better as an audiobook. So instead of getting the book for book of the month, I ended up on a waitlist on Libby to listen to the audiobook. So this book is historical fiction. It takes place in the 1960s and 70s in the United States. Nev Charles comes from London to New York City looking to make a career out of music. However, his eclectic style doesn't really get him that far. So his manager decides that he needs somebody else on stage with him to help balance him out. That's how they find Opal Jewel. They discover her in a dive bar singing with her sister in Detroit, Michigan. And from there, the story is all about Nev and Opal's relationship, how they made their music, what happened at this big Rivington showcase to tear them apart, and if they're going to get the band back together, so to speak. Now, the thing that I really liked about this book is that it went deep into issues that are still relevant today. Now, seeing that mirror effect between the 70s and the 2010s was a work of creative genius. So specifically, the author dives into racism issues, she dives into policing, and how that affects both the lives of Nev and Opal. One of my favorite parts about the story arcs was all about Opal embracing who she is. You find out early on the story of how she discovered that she had hair loss as a trait and how her struggle to embrace that also was the struggle to embrace her personality. And I thought that was a fantastic through line throughout the book. One of my favorite characters was a side character. It was somebody who lived in the same apartment building as Opal, and that is Virgil Lafleur. Now, in the context of the story, he is the flamboyant fashion designer who brings Opal her signature flair. And he doesn't just bring the flair in the fashion sense, he also brings it in the personality, and that really comes through in this book. Now, some of his lines were those that I was laughing out loud at, and the way that he phrased things was spot on to a regular person, and I absolutely loved him. Now, one of the most important things for me is that although this book deals with some heavy topics, it's also a very fun listen. I loved listening to it. Now, this book gets a lot of comparisons to Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book was a book that I listened to earlier in the summer, and it does have a lot of similarities in the fact of how it's written. Both of these books are written as an audio documentary written out. Both of them have narrators of the book that pop out of the page that cross that divide, because there's a character in the book who's writing the book, and I find that concept fascinating. Both of these books make a great audiobook listen because both of them have full casts. What that means is that each character is read by a different narrator. So for example, Opal, Nev, Virgil, they all have different voice actors. So it's almost like listening to a book in podcast form. Now, the differences between Daisy Jones and Opal and Neb have to do with the themes. Now, Daisy Jones deals a lot with heartbreak. It deals a lot with rich people, which is something Taylor Jenkins Reid is known for digging into. And that actually has a lot of themes of alcoholism. That's a big part of that book. However, for Opal and Neb, it's really the racism and the prejudice that Opal and Neb have to overcome both with themselves and with society. Now, I highly recommend both of these, especially if you're into the music scene of the 60s and 70s. And again, both of them make a fantastic audiobook listen. The next book I'm going to talk about is The All-Consuming World. Now, I was lucky enough to get an advanced reader copy of this book, and it came out this month. Now, this is a sci-fi story that takes place in the distant future where humans are part robot, and robots can have characteristics and personalities of humans. And as you're reading it, you don't quite know who's a human and who's a person, and that is just where the story begins to take on its weirdness. Now, this story follows a bunch of different people. Rita and Maya are what I would consider the main characters. There's a couple other of points of view that we get, but it's few and far in between. So these two are clones, which from what I can tell means that they can die, but then they regenerate magically back into a tube-like structure, and they're not dead. So before I continue on, I should let you know that this book really confused me. I'm going to go into reasons why it confused me a little later, but just know I might be completely wrong about this summary. This is just what I took away. What ends up happening is that Rita and Maya decide that they want to get their old criminal gang, who's also clones, back together in order to take over this planet Dimberger. I don't know. They want to take over a planet. And the reason they want to take over this planet is to be able to save their human race, save the clones. Now, the people that don't want them to get to this planet are the robots that are called minds that are in charge of the world. Now, I'm still not 100% sure what a mind is. I think it's a computer, but it's a computer that can transfer from like a robot to a spaceship to another spaceship via the conversation, which I think is something like the internet, but in the future. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about a few things that I did appreciate. So as you can tell from my quick summary, the world building was very interesting. It connected with the themes, and it was something really unique, especially for me as a software programmer, for reading how people might interpret how code gets handled in the future, and the fact that robots are able to change their own code, which is part of the reason why currently robots can't really take over the world. And so I found the whole like world building concept well done. I also found the themes super interesting. The main theme I would take away has to do with what makes us human. Is it our personality? Is it our intelligence? Is it our physical body? And along with that is what makes us dead or alive. If our personality is uploaded to the internet, but our physical body disappears, are we still alive? I found those themes to be explored actually super interesting. So in a way, this book made me think of things that I wouldn't normally think about. So now, to the things that I struggled with. So, the first thing that I struggled with was the language and the word choices. This book felt like I was back in 3rd grade trying to read a high school grade level book. The vocabulary was way out of my league, so I could only understand about 75% of the book because there were just too many words that I didn't know. The language for me was very, very obstructive because if I can't understand a lot of the story, I can't appreciate a lot of the story. Now, this next segment is going to have a smidge of swearing in it, and so if swearing is not your jam, A, don't read this book because I swear there are instances of swear words on every page, and 2, I'm going to be swearing as a couple examples in this next minute 30 seconds, so if you don't want to hear that, go ahead and fast forward. So the author decided to use the word fuck a lot. It was every page. There was one instance that she had 4 uses of that word in one sentence. How the oil gargling fuck are we supposed to figure out who the fucking fuck is going to try fucking with her? That is 4. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the ending. Now, I might get into some slight spoilers, so if you are interested in reading this book and you don't want to get any spoilers, you can jump ahead to the timestamp down below so you don't get spoiled. The ending ends just as the protagonists are riding into the planet. Ends. It ends right there. I don't know what happens after that. Are they dead? Did they take over the planet? No one knows. The other revelation that was in the ending, one of the motivations of the characters was that she wanted to not only take over the planet, she wanted to become the planet. Now, there's a lot of far off things in this book, but I think somebody wanting to become a whole planet might just be the weirdest. Now, after reading that last one, this next book was a fresh of breath air. A breath of fresh air. And that is a bright young thing. Now, similar to the last book, I was given an advanced reader copy of this book, and it came out earlier this month. Now, this book is a light, fun historical fiction read that takes place in the 1930s. Astra is a 20-something in the fancy high society of London when her parents die in a tragic car accident. This propels Astra from her lifestyle of coziness and not really doing anything into the world of adult responsibilities. She has to discover her parents' secrets. She has to figure out what they would have wanted. She has to figure out what she herself would want. Now, enter Jeremy. Jeremy is a bachelor in the same circle as Astra. Now, he has his own past that he's been dealing with. Similar to Astra, his parents have passed away, and he is the heir to his fortune that might be smaller than the world thinks. And a lot of this book is Astra and Jeremy and their back and forths, which honestly are the best part of the book. I loved seeing those two interact. They had so much flirting, but it was done in such elegance, and it was exactly what I wanted out of a book like this. This book does not tackle any hard issues, but it is a light read that's meant to whisk you away to a different time in an imaginary place, and it does that extremely well. Along with that love story, there's also a lot of plot twists, specifically in Astra's personal life. She finds out about a family member. She finds out about her parents' secrets. I absolutely love how it's done. Similarly, I really like how the growth of Astra follows a satisfying arc. At the beginning, she struggles a lot with general adult responsibilities, and by the end, she has figured out how to handle herself accordingly. And I really liked that growth arc because for me as a 20, almost 30 something, this is something I can really relate to. The responsibilities that I have grown into. Now, the one thing that I wasn't quite as fond of was that there were two kind of main villains, and I use villains in quotation marks because it is a historical fiction book, so there's not somebody like trying to take over the world. And one of these villains has a good character arc in the fact that they grow and they learn from their mistakes, which is pretty much what everyone in the book does, except the one other villain. Now, normally I wouldn't have a problem with this, but it kind of stuck out like a sore thumb because everyone else grew except this one person. And that kind of frustrated me because I think I wanted her to have a growth arc even more than the other antagonist. And I really wish we could have seen her grow into a better person. Overall, I would recommend this book if you are looking for a light, fun read that takes you away and doesn't make you think too much. So the next two books that I read in August, I'm only going to go over very briefly here because I'm going to make other videos with other books that I think they belong with more. So the first one is The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. This I would categorize as nonfiction self-help, and it's all about how Gretchen spent a year trying to make herself happier. Now there's lots of ideas about things that helped me and can maybe help you grow into more happiness in your life. Overall, I really enjoyed this book, and hopefully I'll be talking about it more with some other nonfiction books. The next book was actually a writing book, and that was 2,000 to 10,000 or 2K to 10K. Now, this was the first book that I have read for NaNoWriMo, and this book is all about how to write better, how to write faster. The first whole half is all about how the author went from writing 2,000 words in a day to 10,000 words in a day. And the second half was filled with different tips and tricks about the writing process. So for example, plotting and editing and things like that. It was a good read, and you can see I tabbed many different things along the way. Well, my camera battery ran out, so we are going to try this again. I am back the next morning. I have a lovely cup of coffee with me, and I am going to talk about my favorite book that I read in August, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I actually listened to this on audiobook, and it is a fantastic listening experience. So Legendborn follows a 16-year-old named Bree Matthews. Now, Bree is an early college student at UNC. Now, a major part of her story is that her mother passed away before she was able to start attending UNC. Now, Bree went anyway, partially to escape her mother's death and partially to escape the small town that she was sick of being a part of. Her first night on campus, Bree goes to a party like any college student would, and she ends up witnessing a magical demon attack. This witnessing propels her into this crazy secret society that she manages to become a part of via her mentor, Nick. Now, Nick is an ex-member of the society. He left the society in his past because of reasons that are unknown to Bree at the beginning, but he decides that he wants to help Bree find out the truth, and so he helps her join this society. Now, where things get super complicated is that this society is fighting a magical war with demons, and at the time, this war is escalating, and everyone is kind of freaking out that this big thing called Camlan is going to happen. Now, I don't want to give too much more away of the plot, but there's a couple other characters that I want to be sure to mention. So, as part of this society, Bree finds out there are these people called Merlins, which have magic, they have illusion, just like Merlin in the King Arthur tale. She thinks one of these Merlins had something to do with her mother's death, which is part of what is driving her to join this organization. The Merlin that is at her secret society, his name is Sal. Now, Sal is one of the characters that I hated at the beginning and I loved at the end. And I really think that is a part of the genius of Tracy Deonn's work, is that she is able to have me root for somebody who is so rude at the beginning. Now, before we get too far, there is a bit of a love triangle that forms between Bree and Nick and Bree and Sal. Normally, I hate love triangles. However, I am somehow rooting for this love triangle. Now, this book has action that starts right away. That demon attack happens in the first chapter. And I think that's part of why I love this book so much, is that because it's always action, there's always something happening, there's always something propelling the plot forward, so you want to keep reading, you want to keep listening. In addition to the action, there's also a ton of genius plot twists. And when you think you've figured out all of them, you haven't. My goodness, the ending. The ending is... there are no words to describe this ending. It is so well done, and it makes me even more excited for the sequel, which is called Bloodmarked, and that is coming out next year in 2022, and I am so looking forward to it. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention my absolute favorite character, and that is Bree's grandmother. The interactions we see with her are very limited, but every single one had me laughing out loud. Her grandmother is my absolute favorite character, and I hope we see more of her in the future. As far as characters go, the three main characters that I would say, Bree, Nick, and Sal, they all have character growth throughout the novel, and I really appreciate that. You follow Bree and you're rooting for her to really figure out about her past, figure out about her mother's past, but in addition, you're also rooting for Nick and Sal to come to terms with their pasts. Combining that with the legend of King Arthur helps to make this story have multitudes of complexity. Now, I didn't know too much about the legend of King Arthur going into it. I had heard about pulling the sword out of the stone, but I actually didn't realize that was part of the King Arthur tale until I read this. I actually think going into this with not a whole lot of knowledge of King Arthur's tale makes this even better, because it makes the plot twists even crazier. Oh. Now, apart from all of those other elements, the plot twists, the characters, this book also has a ton of well done diversity. Bree is a Black student, and her relationships and her interactions, especially with her father, really focus on what it means to be a Black woman in the United States. Bree goes to join the society that is full of white people. Part of this is that different people have different reactions. Some people will stand up for Bree when somebody says something that's racist to her, and some people are the people saying the racist stuff. And I think it's just so well done in that it's integral to the story. If Bree was white, this story would not be nearly as well done. There are also a few LGBTQ plus characters, and so this book is just chock full of diversity, across the spectrum. No matter who you are, you will probably be able to find someone to identify with, and I think that's really important, and I think that's part of the reason why this book is so well loved. I have not heard a person yet say that they don't like this book. So if you like fantasy at all, I highly encourage you to pick this book up. You will be glad you did. Now that's the end of all of the books that I read for August. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe down below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.